In this video, I'm going to review some key issues related to bias in psychological research. I recommend that you review the module overview before watching these videos. And of course, you can use the timeline to identify those key areas while we're going through the video. There are two main integrative themes that I want you to consider when reviewing the course materials in order to connect the chapter to your everyday experiences. First, psychologists strive to promote respect for human diversity in its many forms. And I also want you to remember that perceptions filter our experiences of the world through our imperfect personal lens. At the end of this video, you should be able to identify methodological issues that are magnified when studying other cultures. And you should be able to distinguish between ethnocentric bias and cultural attribution theory. Let's get started with a concept we learned about earlier. That's weirdos. By only studying weird populations, Western, educated, industrialized, rich, and democratic cultures, psychologists fail to account for a substantial amount of diversity of our global population. Applying the findings from weird populations to other populations around the world can lead to a miscalculation of psychological theories and may hinder our ability to isolate fundamental cultural characteristics. It's shocking to think, but 96% of participants in psychology studies come from weird cultures, and the majority of those participants are psychology students. This raises some really important questions about the representativeness of samples when we're making cultural comparisons. What do we mean by a representative sample? Well, a representative sample refers to whether the people who we ask to participate are good representatives of the culture or of the construct that we're trying to study. If that's not the case, then we've got sampling bias. I'm going to give you an example. Let's say that we want to ask middle school students about their online shopping experiences. Now, this may not be representative of middle school students in Kenya, Africa, who have limited access to computers, the internet, or other forms of technology. That's going to be a biased sample. It goes deeper than that. It's more than just demographics. Being part of a specific demographic doesn't have the same meaning everywhere around the world. So researchers should really focus on experiences and not just the demographic checkboxes like gender, ethnicity, heritage, marital status, education. I'm going to give you another example. These pictures of Madonna and Child are from Japan and Italy, and they reflect how culture can influence religion. Being Catholic in the United States does not have the same meaning as being Catholic in Japan or Brazil. And it's important that researchers consider the experiences of their samples in addition to just that basic demographic information. I also want to talk about interpretation bias. Interpretation bias occurs when the culture of the researcher biases the ways in which he or she interprets the findings of their study. There are two types that we're going to focus on: ethnocentric bias and the cultural attribution fallacy. Let's start with ethnocentrism. This is a bias that makes us perceive the world from our own cultural lenses, seeing our own culture as superior and judging other cultures as less than or judging them as inferior. This bias can cause researchers to draw inaccurate and inappropriate conclusions about our research and about our sample. The cultural attribution fallacy happens when researchers find something statistically significant, and then they decide with absolutely no evidence that their results are related to culture. That's the attribution fallacy. Remember, psychologists strive to promote respect for human diversity in its many forms, but it's important to know that psychology can do more. I challenge you to consider the samples and populations that were used to study many of the concepts that we're learning about this semester, like morality, identity, attachment, cognition, emotions, and other key concepts. As you progress through your academics, I challenge you, when you're reading a journal article, to review the sample descriptions and to ask yourself whether this sample is representative and whether it addresses true cultural differences.